Good evening, everybody. So it's been an exciting day, and in this exciting day of biliopancreatic and luminal interventions, now let us have a quick chat about the role of EUS in liver disease. So, all right. So echo endoscopes have come a long way from diagnostic radial scopes to highly therapeutic, paradigm-changing biliopancreatic interventional tools. And so have there has been a sea change in the evolution of endoscopic drainages, and there have been exciting things happening. But in this world of exciting pancreatic necrosectomies and EUS guided gastrojejunostomies, the liver has not been keeping up in terms of EUS guided interventions and EUS guided evaluation. But as expertise permeates and develops throughout the community, we are seeing expanded indications of the use of EUS in liver disease. So let us try to talk about a few of those. So the most established indication is, as of now, we have seen a couple of cases today in gastric varices, management of gastric varices. And in addition, there have been good indications in terms of tissue acquisition, portal hypertension, evolving evidence in terms of parenchymal evaluation, and some newer indications that we will talk about in brief. To begin with, we'll talk about the most robust evidence of liver indications, that is treating gastric varices. We've seen a couple of cases today, and we're all familiar with this, dreadful bleeder that is pouring out blood in the fundus, and the visibility is impaired, and we just go ahead and give a glue injection, and in most cases we succeed, but there's a reasonably high complication rate. So glue injection requires endoscopic glue injection requires good amount of expertise. There is always a risk to equipment, sometimes even to personnel, because the glue can sometimes spray out, and oftentimes the vision gets clouded because of active bleeding. Now EUS actually gives us a very good view and a very good window to treat these patients, because we have this instead of injecting into a naked mucosa of the varix, we have this protection of two layers of gastric and esophageal mucosa, and maybe even the crura of diaphragm if we are lucky. So there's a bit of protection, and we are able to achieve a good amount of glue injection, and we are able to do it under direct vision. We know exactly what we are injecting and where we are injecting. We have options like glue injection, coiling, coil and glue combination, even gel foam. There has been an evolving talk about it. So let's look at the evidence. Now, when coils were used against cyanoacrylate glue head to head, there seems to be less embolization and less side effects with the use of coils. But again, these are not very, the evidence is not very robust, it's very sparse, but it seems that this is a reasonable way to go about it. And as of now, there is a still a divide, but most people do concur that EUS guided injection of glue is actually a good way to go about, a safe way to go about it. This experience of 152 patients, this landmark experience published in 2016, showed us that out of 152 patients, only one had significant embolization, and about 8% risk of rebleed from gastric varices per se, which is actually pretty good. Is it the coil and the glue combination, or the coils that are doing better, or the glue that is doing better? Is coil just a scaffold, or the coil itself causes a good amount of hemostasis? Now, this is a question that this group looked at, and they found that by using coils alone, they were able to achieve complete obliteration in about 90% cases. Immediate varix disappearance was dismal, but then that is expected because just the coil will take some time to cause the thrombosis. However, with time, there seems to be a very high rate of varix reappearance. And for that reason, maybe coils alone is not the best way to go about things. What of gel foam? So is the mic on? Yeah. So what of using gel foam? So is it on? Yeah. Yeah. So so there's a group that tried to look at the use of gel foam with coils. And they use a large amount of coils. 8 to 12 coils as opposed to 2 to 3 coils that have been placed previously. And there was a good amount of hemostasis achieved. That said, the costs would be astronomical if this amount of coils are used. So this is a further study by the same group, which showed that the use of cyanoacrylate injection versus EUS guided coil plus um, a gelatin sponge, that is gel foam, showed reduced variceal rebleed, reduced overall rebleed, and reduced reintervention rates. But again, this is a large amount of coils that have been used that will drive the cost up very high. So to summarize the evidence on glue, direct glue versus EUS plus coil, this is a busy slide, so I'll just summarize. The hemostasis rates are comparable. The obliteration rates, EUS seems to be doing better. And among EUS related techniques, maybe coil glue combination is better than other. That said, the evidence is scant, sparse, and not always comparable, as it has evolved over a long amount of time. So we need better head-to-head trials. There's now also talk of using EUS as a primary prophylaxis, but we only have a small amount of data on that. Now let's come to assessment of portal hypertension. So collaterals can be very well seen on EUS, both radial and linear, and esophageal varices are diagnosed better with EUS. Gastric varices are diagnosed even better with the EUS. That said, this is not does not seem to be a justified way to evaluate using EUS directly. Now, this is an interesting indication. This is where I feel there's a great utility of EUS. This is when there is an evaluation of patients with suspected cirrhosis, whether there is clinically significant portal hypertension. Now, this patient came to us with suspected portal hypertension. We had to decide if this was clinically significant or not. Now, usually we would do a HVPG and transjugular liver biopsy, but just this EUS, diagnostic EUS, showed us some periesophageal collaterals and perforators that gave us a diagnosis of a clinically significant portal hypertension. So that's it. So patients with CKD and patients with advanced fibrosis who often have this intermediate range or high range of fibroscan values, but we do not know for sure whether they have CSPH or clinically significant portal hypertension. These are the patients who can actually benefit from this therapy. Now, EUS can also be used to predict early recurrence of bleeding. This is old data showing inflowing perforators, which can predict bleeding. The presence of left gastric vein, hepatofugal flow more than a certain velocity, say 12 centimeters per second, that again predicts a high rates of rebleeding. But now there's been some exciting development. Cook has come up with a new needle that is not yet available in India, but it's a 25 gauge needle, which can be directly inserted into the portal vein and the hepatic vein, and a direct portal pressure gradient can be calculated as opposed to a hepatic venous pressure gradient, which is an indirect measurement of portal hypertension. We don't always need to use that needle. There's this Chinese group which has used the usual Philips and IntelliVue CVP measurement monitors, and using a 22 gauge needle, they have shown the same similar results and comparable to HVPG level pressures. Now, coming to parenchyma assessment of the liver parenchymal assessment. Now, EUS holds a very major advantage here. There lies the beauty of the EUS actually. May not be very clinically relevant in most cases, but it is really beautiful. While transabdominal gives you up to 6 megahertz of frequency, and linear or high frequency probes give you 8 to 10, 11 megahertz of frequency. EUS gives you frequencies somewhere between 5 to 12 megahertz. Now, this itself improves the resolution quite a bit. And then, while transabdominal probes are placed on the abdominal surface, and anywhere between 2 to 6 centimeters of tissue is intervening between the probe and the liver, EUS is sitting right on top of the liver. And so we have better spatial resolution, better temporal resolution, and better 2-point resolution because of higher frequency. So that gives us a very nice picture of the liver. And then we can just rotate it and look at the collaterals and assess otherwise as well. The role of elastography in assessment of EUS elastography in liver fibrosis is Still evolving. This is old data. We don't have very convincing data yet. Maybe it will evolve over time. But as of now, it seems that there is some correlation. Coming to a new indication that has been evolving very rapidly now, EUS-guided liver biopsies. Now, percutaneous biopsies have been the standard of care, but they do have, we traverse through the skin, so there is pain and there are complications that do happen from time to time. So an adequate sample for percutaneous biopsy is described by different societies in different ways. In general, more than 15 millimeters or more than 10 CPTs should be good enough. But a systematic review of the quality of liver biopsies show that percutaneous biopsy as well as TJLBs often fall short of that mark. Let us look at what EUS does. Now, older studies of EUS-guided liver biopsies have shown fragmented, smaller samples, but newer data that is coming up. I'm sorry, we are running short of time, so I'm going to speed up. So with time, we've seen that with the newer 19 gauge needles, we are able to achieve good specimen lengths with good specimen adequacy of over 90%. And it is also shown that as experience improves, we can reach astronomical number of portal tracts, actually up to 73 and 42 and 27 portal tracts. That's a large amount of portal tracts. So we can almost always get a diagnosis. The results of EUS guided biopsy seem to be at par and oftentimes better than transjugular and percutaneous biopsies as well. At least they seem to be at par. But again, we have to understand that these are smaller studies and these are early studies. So there might be an element of bias there, but it seems promising. In terms of safety, it definitely seems that this procedure is safer, more patient friendly. There's a lesser length of hospital stay and seems to be lesser pain. So that's good. Coming to passes and actuations. So we've seen that one pass, one actuation with a wet section technique seems to be giving us the desired number of portal tracts in over 80% cases. Single pass, one needle versus single pass, three needle actuations. Again, three needle actuations gives us a very good amount of sample, again, without any compromised safety. So that seems to be a very good way to go about things. And here we see that wet heparin suction seems to be improving diagnostic yield further. So overall, wet suction with heparin prime needle, 19 gauge seems to be doing the job. Can we go thinner? Probably not, because sample adequacy is compromised when we use a 22 gauge FNB needle. And there seem to be many more small fragments. So that may not be the best way to go about it. So as of now, the evidence does not support using thinner needles as opposed to the 19 gauge needles. So pros and cons. Percutaneous liver biopsies have a good yield. EUS also has a fair to good yield. Safety seems to be good in all. EUS is probably safer than percutaneous. Access to EUS and transjugular both are limited, but here is where the sweet spot is. Percutaneous biopsies are cheaper. Transjugular are very expensive. EUS lies somewhere in the middle. So overall, EUS seems to be a good bargain when it comes to good patient selection without much coagulopathy, probably right now without cirrhosis, who cannot spend a lot of money and want some patient some comfort. I think that EUS would be a good way to go about these biopsies. That said, the evidence is still evolving on this. I am going to skip over focal SOL assessment because this has been covered in many other lectures today. Overall, it seems that once we are in there doing a diagnostic EUS, if we do find SOS, it may be a good idea to go ahead and take a sample. I would still want to talk about EUS-derived criteria for malignant lesions of the liver. If the lesions are hyperechoic or geographic, they do not seem to be malignant. The chances of them being malignant are much lower. On the other hand, if there seem to be more than one components to the tumor, if there is a post-acoustic enhancement, if there's a distortion of adjacent structures, if the rims are hypoechoic, and if the size is more than 10 millimeters, there's a high chance that the lesion might be malignant and deserve sampling. Elastography of liver lesions, again, data is very sparse, scant, and old, but there seems to be a role there. It needs much more validation before it can come anywhere close to the prime time. I'm going to skip over this. Just some other evolving indications. Liver abscess. There are a few case reports here and there of using EUS guided drainage for drainage of liver abscess. Most of these abscesses can be drained percutaneously also. So why use EUS? Well, I would say the argument is the same as the use of EUS guided drainage for PTBD. This is an internal drainage, much better patient comfort once the safety and efficacy are established. So I feel that the evidence on this is very, very preliminary, but it is definitely something that may be worth pursuing in terms of patient comfort. Some other indications can be locoregional therapy. Again, very, very preliminary evidence, and we are nowhere close to recommending this, but some people have tried injecting ethanol. Some people have tried doing photodynamic therapy, brachytherapy using EUS. And just a couple of slides more. In animal studies, we have EUS guided TIPS, EUS guided portal venous infusion chemotherapy, and EUS guided portal vein stenting. So this seems to be very, very, very early evidence, and I do not know whether this will ever see the light of the day, but this is definitely exciting how we can push boundaries of EUS. So to summarize, EUS in liver diseases, the role is rapidly expanding. The role is rather well established in terms of gastric varices. Probably glue plus coils has the most robust evidence, and whether it can be used in primary prophylaxis, I think time will tell. Focal lesions, the role is quite well established, just like any other focal lesion. FNBs are probably better than FNAs. Liver biopsy, we are very close to coming this for clinical utility, coming to this, but as of now, I think that it is still not ready to be used in general clinical practice, probably restricted to research centers. And portal pressure, liver abscess drainage are the next kids on the block. We'll see if they ever come to final light. So this is my last slide. Single sedation cirrhosis in a patient with cirrhosis. In a single sedation, if the patient comes for upper GI and variceal staining, what all can we do? We can do an assessment of collaterals. We can obliterate a GOV if there is one. Do a liver biopsy if required. A parenchymal screening for HCC. Maybe adding contrast ultrasound. May do a FND if it is an atypical HCC. And evaluation of metastasis, because most of the metastasis sites of HCC are very close to the area that we can see in the EUS. And we can also do a bubble study of the left atrium and right atrium. So with this, I will finish my talk for today. Any questions or comments would be welcome.